All right, it's time again for another edition of Drummer Nation Live, the show where we talk about all things about drums, drumming, and drummers. And of course, I have my illustrious partner with me in crime today, Adam Nussbaum. Hey, Adam, how are you, brother?
How? I ask myself that question every morning. How?
I ask
And I'm
myself,
just glad I am.
right, there you go. I ask myself, why? Why am I? But anyway, it's the first
Have to
show of the
be a
new year.
genius. Yeah, Happy New Year. I'd have to be a genius to tell you how, but amen that it just is.
You just are, man, and we're delighted you are. How was your Happy New Year, belated, but first show of the new year? How was your holiday season?
Everything was nice. Everything was very enjoyable. Had a quiet night with the wife. Had a nice Indian meal. Went out to our local jaunt and stayed there till about 11:30. Then came home to watch the ball drop and probably was asleep about 5 after 12.
Well, my holiday was miserable, and I'll tell you why. I got COVID. My whole family got COVID. Kevin had come down to stay with us from Nashville for the holiday, and by the day after, December 27th, we were all sick as dogs. And I tested positive. Took 12 days to test negative. So I had a miserable New Year's Eve was my birthday. New Year's Eve sucked. New Year's Day, and then I had to cancel my trip to New Orleans for the Gen Conference, where I was meeting up with my pals and buddies. And it took, like I said, 12 days of not very much fun. But if you can live together as a family in a house for that long with everybody sick, that says something positive, I suppose.
Nobody killed anybody, so that's a good thing.
No harm, no foul. We got through it.
Amen.
Anyway,
Amen.
he
Glad you're okay.
Thank you. He had to cancel a bunch of gigs here, and he's back up in Nashville now doing his thing. So we were looking at show topics, and Adam said, there's a lot of drummers with birthdays in January. And he was right. We're going to focus on like 5 key guys and see how much time we have. But let's just look at this list for a second, Adam. Some of these I got from you. You tell me if I'm missing anybody. Questlove, Jimmy Cobb, Phil Collins, Dave Grohl, JoJo Meyer, Gene Krupa, Dave Weckl, Paul Wertico, Max Roach. I'm only like halfway done. Kurt Biscara, Ansley Dunbar, Steven Adler, Nick Mason, Rob Burden, Ed Shaughnessy, Sid Catlett, Al Foster, Jeff Watts, Kenny Clark.
Whew.
Ooh, man.
If all you did was listen to those cats, you'd be in good shape.
I wonder what was happening 9 months before January that caused all these guys to come around.
Was Easter?
I don't know. Something was in the air. There's an old joke there I won't go to.
Okay.
All right. So let's knock these out. We're going to do like 5 of them. We thought we might do Gene, of course, Sid Catlett, Kenny Clark, Max Roach, and Jimmy Cobb, because they all sort of fit together in a certain genre. And we'll see how much time we have with that. But
Right.
The first drum star is this guy here, Gene Krupa. And I'll let you fill in, Adam, from there. What do we owe to Gene?
Well, Gene, first of all, he had a great beat, and I think that's why initially he was an entity and a commodity to have in a band. And he was also somebody who brought the drums more to the foreground, taking a drum solo. The public generally see more than hear. They liked the way this cat looked. He was very presentable. He played very clear ideas. And he was also part of one of the first integrated groups, which was the Benny Goodman group that brought in Teddy Wilson and then later on brought in Lionel Hampton.
On Vibes.
And, Gene was out of Chicago, and he was somebody who just helped to bring the drums more to the foreground with the general public. He was
That's
always very respected by other musicians as well. And he was a gentleman.
that's a good point about the general public because he was also the first celebrity drummer, and
Right.
he was in movies. He's the kind of guy, if he were alive today, he could go to a mall in Des Moines and people would know who he was. We don't see
Absolutely.
many celebrities anymore. And of course, the famous drum solo, you know, as you said, he brought to fore the extended drum solo. And of course, the one everybody cites is Sing, Sing, Sing with Benny Goodman, which
Right,
he recorded
right,
in
but written,
37.
yeah, and written by Louis Prima,
That's right. That's right.
who was another wonderful band leader. And a lot of people called him the Italian Louis Armstrong
hmm New Orleans guy,
because he
too.
was from New Orleans.
hmm
And he was a fantastic entertainer as well as a wonderful trumpet player and a good band leader.
hmm And he
So,
loved that double shuffle, two-handed, fast, fast, fast tunes
yeah,
like Just a Gigolo.
yep. Jimmy Vincent was the drummer on a lot of that stuff with Louis.
Mhm.
And what was great with Louis Prima's band is the balance between him and his very extroverted style and Keely Smith, who was also in the front line, who was
Right.
very cool. And the
Super
balance,
cool. He's jumping all around and ha, hoo, ha, ha, and she's just like looking at him like he's crazy. She's super cool, and it was a perfect foil together. But
yeah.
Gene was the cat, man, and a lot of people still, if they had to limit it to one drummer, they would choose Gene. Now he was overshadowed a bit by Buddy in terms of technique, but two different guys there, man. You know, Buddy was like the extension of Gene.
Well, I think these gentlemen grew up in that time where there was also somebody who wasn't born in January. There was Chick Webb,
hmm
who had a profound effect on many of these gentlemen. And I also think that, Gene was in Chicago and there was also Dave Tuff there. There was a bunch. I mean, as soon as I start naming some, I know I'm forgetting some.
Yeah, we can't cover them all.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, but Gene Krupa, he was extremely loved in the community as well.
mhm.
He was a just a very nice gentleman. I think the movie that they made was like most movies dealing with the jazz topic. They made more of certain elements that were not necessarily that really important.
It's always negative in the jazz media, or whenever there's a movie. Miles used to talk about that. You know, it was always negative. He had a more profound way of saying it that I won't do, but you know, you always, even in the movies when there wasn't a jazz musician, if there was a seedy nightclub or something, or a seedy, noir kind of scene, they would put jazz music with it.
Unfortunately, jazz by many is still considered a four-letter word.
hmm
And the reality of the situation is it's one of the only true art forms that we gave to the world that originated here in the United States.
And not only that, the drum set originated as a jazz instrument. So I
Yeah,
think if you're going to learn the violin, you know, you're going to go back to 16th century stuff. If you're going to learn any musical instrument and genre, you're going to go back and learn where it all came from. And in the drum set, it came from jazz, man.
sure. I mean, we all have our biological fathers and we all have our musical fathers. And if you are serious about the instrument, you have to realize that it's not too much more than 100 years old.
Right.
And if you're a classical musician, like you said, you'd be going back 600 years. The people that came before us built the foundation.
hmm
And you have to be aware of that. I remember when Mavis Staples was getting the Kennedy Center Award, and she was part of the Staples Singers that was basically their father, Pops, with the sisters and everything and his kids. And she said something great, and I loved it. She goes, Pops built the foundation. We're just working on the building.
There
And
you
the
go.
people that came before us definitely built a foundation. And
Hey,
we're all a combination of the things that came before us and how we've all absorbed that information.
right.
There was that great comedian that we would all know of, a lot of the younger generation may not, Milton Berle. And he was once quoted as saying,
Uncle
to steal
Milty.
from one person is plagiarism, but to steal from many is research.
That's right. That's right. And I don't care if you're a death metal guy, whatever your genre is, man, you can only learn from these cats. You can't take anything
Absolutely.
away from you by learning this stuff.
Absolutely. It's very important to understand where things are coming from. And whatever you listen to, it's still going to come through your vision and the way you hear things and your point of view. So, I mean, Gene Krupa had a great sound. He had a fantastic feel.
That,
And
that
he
holds you
also,
in good stead in any band, right?
bingo, good sound, good feel. And if you got some ears
Yeah.
and you know how to listen, you're going to work.
Conduct yourself
And
as a professional, and you got the whole package.
right. And these people were also affected by the ones that came before, Baby
Mhm.
Dodd, Zooty Singleton. It's part of a continuum. So Gene Krupa was definitely somebody that was a major player in the whole game. Like you said, most everybody would know who Gene Krupa is, at least
Right.
people of our age and
All right.
our
Well,
parents.
who's this guy?
Oh, this was a gentleman, Big Sid Catlett.
Mhm.
And this gentleman had absorbed the things that had happened before him. And also, he's one of those transitionary musicians where he was also involved in some of the early bebop recordings. And he had a profound influence on people that came after him. Cozy Cole was, he kind of came up along with Big Sid, but Max Roach, Philly Joe Jones, these people were very influenced by Big Sid.
He was known for his
And
beautiful touch and dynamics.
incredible touch. And I cannot recommend enough this recording.
Hmm. Tell us about that.
All right, this was done at Symphony Hall in 1947 with Louis Armstrong. And there's a song on here called Mop Mop, which is basically a drum lick that Max used to play. Max made it famous. A lot of people didn't know it came from Big Sid. That you've probably all heard buddly o bop, buddly o bop, buddly o bop, bop, boop, boop. Ziddly o bop, ziddly o bop, ziddly. That was Big Sid, and that was a solo feature for him on this. And what's incredible is I find it fascinating. He had such a beautiful touch and sound, and he could get so many nuances just from the snare drum alone. You could hear him. It was like he could have like a whole world of rim shots, all different colors, all different textures, and his ability to explore the options and everything that you could do just with the snare drum was amazing. And he's on, he played with Louis Armstrong. He also did things with Dizzy and Charlie Parker. And it's a shame because he passed away from a heart attack, I believe, in 1951. And
Hmm.
so, unfortunately, we didn't get to hear him keep on going. But
Right.
what's interesting is a lot of these bigger gentlemen have a beautiful light touch on the instrument. He
That is
really
very
understood
interesting.
the dynamics.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
And
he was a profound influence on people like Max and Philly and people that came afterwards.
mhm, mhm.
And
Well,
this
go,
this
go
is
ahead.
really a great recording. And for those of you that don't really realize it, Louis Armstrong probably had the most profound effect on popular music of anybody in the last century. Because
Uh,
without him, there'd be he changed everything.
Well, I'm in my 60s, and when I grew up, we knew Louis Armstrong as an entertainer, right?
Right.
Hello, Dolly, and the handkerchief and the smile and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
But we didn't know until I learned later that he was probably the most influential musician in the world of the 20th century. And he was just that heavy as a vocalist, as a trumpet player, as a soloist, just a world ambassador for music and jazz. Pops,
Ab-
his nickname is Pops is Tops in my book.
yeah, I mean, he always sounds modern to me.
Hmm.
Whatever the situation around him may not be, but this guy, amazing sound, amazing phrasing, his trumpet playing and his singing, you really can't separate them.
Right.
And but I was like you. When I was young, I thought he was just like this big smile and the handkerchief and hello, Dolly. Then, upon doing a little bit more information hunting, which we used to have to do and put more effort into than
Hmm.
now, where you
Hmm.
just ask Google or Siri, you found out this cat changed everything. And I think he's an invaluable, person for people to check out. It's amazing, and he always had good bands,
Hmm.
and Big Sid was somebody who could cross through the genres. He could deal in the Dixieland thing. He could deal within the swing thing, and then he got into the bebop thing. So that in itself is pretty impressive.
Pretty hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are some recordings that were done later in his life when, because the thing is, when these gentlemen passed away, recording technology wasn't as it is now and wasn't as it was in the mid 50s. So they were just beginning to get it together with knowing how to record drums and things like that.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to think of who the artist is. There's a few recordings of him with a trumpet player where the sound is quite good. You might be able to find him on YouTube or something, but he's definitely somebody worth checking out. Beautiful
Absolutely.
feel, sound. And when he's taking a solo, you can also hear on the record he's doing things that were visually interesting because you hear that crowd reacting in certain ways. So
Right.
we have to remember these people were not only great musicians, they came up in the time through vaudeville and things like that where it was more of a popular music. So there was an entertainment factor that was
Sure.
something to be considered.
Going back to Gene again, very much
Yeah,
an entertainer. Very much an entertainer.
yeah,
Um,
for sure,
all
for
right, let's
sure.
look at the next cat. Who's that?
Oh man, well, he's kind of called one of the fathers of modern drumming, and that's Kenny Clark,
Hmm.
who came out of Pittsburgh. That's another town that had a very, very fertile musical environment, to say the least.
To say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Um, Kenny Clark had the nickname Klook, which was short for Klook Bop, which was what is that called? Onomatopoeia or something? That's from bebop phrasing, right?
yeah, sure.
Moving the time to the cymbal and comping with the dropping bombs and all that. People didn't know
Yeah, I
what
mean,
that was.
this stuff was done, I think, at times by Joe Jones. But Kluke really seemed to liberate the bottom of the drum set in such a way where the bass drum wasn't primarily playing four all the time. The
Right.
time continuum was more up on the ride cymbal. And we have to remember what that name is, the ride
Hmm.
cymbal. That's what the band gets on so they can play the ride. You want
Yeah.
that ride to glide. And Kluke had a beautiful beat. I mean, fantastic. And he was somebody that then opened the door, and it continued on with people developing what he had started. Max Roach had continued to do things like that, and you know. Kluke, this was fascinating how they're all kind of melding together. Things
Hmm.
that Papa Joe did, things that Big Sid did, things that Clute did, things that then Max did. There was just a lot of kind of, I guess, cross-pollination happening
Sure, yeah.
within the tradition and the scene. So Kluk is somebody that was just loved by so many. Everybody just loved how he had such a great swing and a
Let, let's
feel.
let's talk about that for a minute. You say a great beat. People talk about a big beat, owning your beat, a great swing feel. How can we put that into terms maybe for younger players who don't know these genres? What does that mean, a great beat or a big beat?
Well, having a great momentum and flow in what's happening on that ride cymbal, the way it could just create a good feeling for the band. I've Unfortunately, I only heard Kenny Clark play live for 4 measures.
What was that?
Oh man, I was playing in Paris at a club called the New Morning, and it might have been 80 or 81, and Kluk was playing around the corner from where we were playing at a little club. I can't remember the name of it. And I rushed after my gig to go down to see him. And as I was going down the stairs, I heard him going, "Ba-do-la-dee-bo, ba 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 ba-do, ba ba-do-bee-boo-bee."
Good night,
And,
folks.
and and as I got down into the club where he was, the cymbal was just ringing. They had finished.
Oh, oh,
There's some fantastic videos of him playing, and he's just somebody that had a profound effect on everybody, and everybody that played with this gentleman loved how he played. They said he had a cymbal that when other people would sit in and play it, it sounded like a garbage can, but when he played it, it sounded like he was playing a piece of crystal.
isn't that something? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, like Tony Williams had a great specific dry K sound when he was with Miles, but there's some recordings of him in Europe playing Paiste cymbals, which are no slight on Paiste, but they're sonically opposite what we know as Tony's sound, and he sounded like Tony.
Well, there's that old expression, it's the painter, not the brush. You can't get too crazy with the gear. And you have to figure out how you're going to develop your sound, your touch. I mean, everything about how the sound comes out is going to be directly related to the kind of motion and grace that you have playing the instrument, learning to play it. Not, of course, we strike it and we hit it, but you want to play it. You don't want to, it's like that term that people use for the bass drum, the kick drum. Are
I hate
we
that term.
kicking that?
I hate that term. Yeah,
I'm totally with you, man.
it's a musical instrument, man. We don't kick it. We don't beat
Right,
a drum. We don't kick a bass drum. We play them
right. I
musically with
understand that in
sensitivity.
the studio when guys are like
No,
talking back, to differentiate between a bass player and the bass drum. They may say the kick, but I don't like that.
yeah.
And the thing is, learning how to get a nice sound on the instrument. I mean, we're at a time now, things are very different. In the era that all these gentlemen came up, the basses weren't amplified. Basses had higher action so they could project. They didn't have pickups. They didn't have anything like that. Drummers had to learn to play softer, be able to play under a band. Everybody had to learn how to get a great sound coming from them, not the
Right,
microphone, not the amplifier.
right.
And so there was a certain discipline that was required. That's why guys knew how to play brushes well.
Hmm.
They knew how to get different textures and understand that. And
And they knew how to feather the bass drum. You know, when people say, well, they played four quarter notes on the bass drum, it wasn't boom, 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 boom. It was a very soft, subtle sound that matched perfectly to round out the bass that was soft in the mix, so that the two of them together made a propulsive, rhythmic thing of beauty. And you didn't
right,
come away hearing thud, 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 thud.
Well, the bass player would smack you upside the head if you're stepping all over his zone.
That's right.
The
Also, the
bass
drums were
player,
tuned open. It wasn't like, those
right?
kind of contemporary kick
It's
sounds.
very different. It was
Yeah,
very different. This you had to have a sonic match with the timbre and the quality of how the sounds work together. I mean, I'm always telling, whenever I do a workshop or something and I see the bass player and the drummer, I said, you got to get a nice blend between the spittle-a-ding and the ickety-boom.
I love that.
It's necessary. And a bass player is the BASE of the sonics in a group. Nobody else is down there. You have to
Right.
stay down there. You got to stay in the lower register to help support a group.
Yeah,
If
well,
you want to play in the upper register, that's for solo time.
I think so
But
as well. Yeah, I don't like to see when somebody's
absolutely.
walking, stay down there. That's your deal. That's your zone as a bass player.
When everybody's getting excited and going up, you got to go down. You got to balance out what's happening. And
That's a good point. Good point.
yeah, I mean, for me, if a bass player can take a solo, that's frosting on the cake.
Right.
My first thing is, how does it feel for me to play with them?
Well, you
I don't
say
even
same thing about
care
a
if the
drummer,
guys,
right?
huh?
Same thing about the drummer. If they can solo, that's icing. That's great, but that's not why you're there.
Right. I mean, 90% of our job is being an accompanist, at least for me and what I do.
Hmm.
I'm trying to help everybody else sound good. And the thing to realize is all these musicians here that we've mentioned today, I'm saying musicians first, not just drummers. They were
Right.
musicians first that played the drums. They all worked because they had gained the trust of the other musicians. And you want to make music with people. Very
Yeah.
important.
That's something that's been kind of overlooked during the pandemic when nobody could get out and play. The gigs were gone. And people were playing in their own rooms, their own spaces. They have this great, sophisticated stuff to record audio and video. And that's terrific. But nothing is like playing real music with real people.
It's a social event. It's something where people have to get together and try to find, like I always say, I want to find kumbaya with everybody when we're
Hmm.
playing,
Hmm.
where we can get along and try to make music. And these are the factors that are present in, well, anybody that's working and whose name you see consistently out there. That's why they're there. Because first they're talking about, and their main priority is playing with each other. And it's on that great recording that Baby Dodds did, talking in drum solos. You got to play for the benefit of the band.
Right.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. That's it. All right. Here's another one that's probably more influential than, well, I don't know more, but some people consider him the father of modern drumming.
Well, Max Roach, I mean, this was an incredibly gifted young man. He came, he was in Brooklyn, he was on the scene, he was there, and he was able to hear those people like Kenny Clark and Papa Joe and all these people. And then we also have to remember the advancement of the drums and how people played had a lot to do with what kind of changes were going on in the music. It's one thing works with the other. They don't just exist independently. And Max was somebody who really developed the aspect of the independence with the snare drum and the bass drum, really took it to a high level. And also, as a soloist, was such an organized thinker, amazingly thematic. And, what can you say? He was playing with Charlie Parker. Charlie
Yeah.
Parker was one of the innovators.
And he was still
And
kind up to his death, too.
absolutely, yeah.
Uh,
And Max is one of the major figures in the music. I mean, undeniable for sure.
my
And
favorite record. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, the band that he had with Clifford Brown was
That's just where I was
amazing.
going. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you want to study drum soloing, musical drum soloing, check out the Clifford Brown, Max Roach. They're on the label MRC, and it's required listening, and it will teach you so much about form and structure. One of the things Max did was before, there used to be a time when everybody left the stage and the drummer went nuts. Everybody had soloed. It was the drummer's turn, and so he played a solo until he or she was done, and then brought the band back in. With Max, and in that era, in the bebop days, they started improvising on the form of the song. So that if it was a 32-bar song, the drum solo was going to be 32 bars or 64 bars or whatever, and the musicians would have to count, know where they were. And if you listen to Max, it's so structurally sound and melodically wonderful that
right.
the construction of it is unbelievably sophisticated.
He's amazingly clear, very symmetrical. I've referred to him sometimes as like the Frank Lloyd Wright. Things are very concise,
Good
very clear
analogy.
to very clear. And Max was also somebody. Well, he did a great record, and this is a fantastic record.
Hmm.
Max Roach, Drums Unlimited. And on this recording, he does several solo drum pieces. One of them is called For Big Sid, which is inspired by Bodliopop, Doodliopop, Bodliopop, Bop, Mop Mop, the Mop Mop. And the way Max constructs it, it's totally with a song form, A. He plays that for the A section. He does an improvisation on the B and A. And he's totally working off that motivic musical idea where it's melody. He's making a melody with the rhythms. And then he also did another one on there called The Drum Also Waltzes.
Hmm.
And these are clear. These are like songs. And if you listen to them enough, like anything, you can sing along. It's
Well,
so clear.
I saw
And
Max live do a 45-minute set by himself, and it wasn't to a drum audience. It wasn't a basic convention or anything. It was normal, normal people who were at a jazz concert. He was the opening act for Gene Harris, and he held the crowd. Man, they weren't drummers because it was so structurally sound. It was music all the way through. You knew where you were. You knew where it was going. You knew. It was a whole piece of music that just happened to be performed on a drum set. He did it for
absolutely,
45 minutes and he held it.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this man, he did so much to open up the possibilities of things that could be achieved. This is a very smart individual. And he was also somebody who was very socially aware.
Hmm.
And if you haven't seen it, I would recommend definitely that documentary that just came out on Max, which you could search out and find. These are documents that the younger musicians definitely should check out. And Max had a profound influence. I mean, on so many people. His clarity, his articulation was exceptional. I mean, he's amazing in the fact that he could really have some stuff going on at fast tempos. He could really play fast.
Really
And he
fast.
also had a lot of vocabulary. And you can hear how he incorporated it in a very musical manner. His things are very structured, very, very orderly, very different. He's more of a vertical improviser where somebody like Elvin might be more horizontal.
Hmm.
Almost like if we would talk about Coleman Hawkins, the way he negotiated the tenor saxophone player chord changes in relation to Lester Young.
Hmm.
Coleman Hawkins hit everything more vertically. Lester Young was more horizontal. And
Right.
all these factors are elements that contribute to how you may want to think about improvising on songs and things like that. But
Hmm.
Max truly could make it sound like a total musical instrument. And The times that I saw this gentleman play were breathtaking, and I heard him play with his own groups. I heard him when he was playing with all-star bands. I heard him do some solo things. I heard him with that great band that he put together called Boom, which was an entire percussion ensemble, which was great. So these are people you have to hear. Did you lose me?
I'm losing audio, Adam.
Oh,
My wireless is running out of juice or something. Let
oh,
me
okay.
limp along because you're not hearing me break up, are you?
They say breaking up,
Let's go to the next guy while I
right?
figure this out. And
Oh,
this is the great Jimmy Cobb.
absolutely.
If you could take that for a minute, I'm going to see if I can fix this.
Okay. Jimmy Cobb, great drummer. He's out of the Washington, D.C. area. He came on the scene. I think he played with the saxophone player Earl Bostic. He had been working with Dinah Washington. And then he was also involved with Cannonball Adderley. And then he probably got his most variety when he came in playing with Miles Davis. And Jimmy Cobb had some beautiful clarity. You can hear the Max Roach influence in a lot of his ideas. He had a swing, it wouldn't budge. You know, his thing was right there on the money, extremely consistent. He was part of one of the great rhythm sections in jazz with Paul Chambers and Wynton Kelly. And one of those records that I think everyone should be aware of are the records Miles Davis Live at the Black Hawk. That's a fantastic band. And Miles had that knack of knowing how to put bands together like nobody else and the balance of characters together. And Jimmy Cobb, anytime I would hear him, I'd be vibed right back to Live at the Black Hawk. That's great. There's the great recordings with Wynton's trio with Wes Montgomery, Smoking at the Half Note. And then later on, Jimmy went on to play with Sarah Vaughan, and just one of the greats. And he's a January drummer, and he's a DC drummer. And another great DC drummer is Billy Hart.
Hmm.
We share the same birthday. That's November. And there's a certain way of holding the time that these guys have that's very special. And
Cobb had a
Jimmy,
great sound, great time feel. That was we right
oh
down the
yeah,
middle, right down the middle, man.
yeah. I mean, you know, it's like any questions? That's right there. A matter of fact. And you know, the great thing for me is I just feel so fortunate. I got to see Max a lot. I got to see Jimmy Cobb, and got to have some interactions with these gentlemen. And they were all so supportive and encouraging. And you never forget that
Right.
when your heroes end up just being so gracious and well, you know, what can you say? You know, that's makes you feel so good. And
Sure.
Jimmy was fantastic, and he was still working up until like he was close to 90, I believe. And every time I heard him, he was totally consistent. This man was, you know, no messing around. I remember giving him a hug one time. He was like a rock, this cat. He was like tough, you know. Somewhere I have a wonderful picture of him with Peter Erskine and I on either side of him, and we're just beaming like a bunch of little kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
very sweet. Jimmy was really, really something else. Wonderful.
Well,
And
I had my changing headphones. I missed some of you. I presume you talked about Kind of Blue, right?
well, I didn't mention Kind of Blue.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I brought it up. The
I'm
most
glad you did.
popular jazz recording ever, still to this day, is Miles Davis' Kind of Blue, and Jimmy Cobb was the drummer on that.
Yeah,
And was for many years the last surviving member of that band. And
absolutely.
it's a landmark recording. If you don't know it, you should. Kind of Blue, Miles
Yeah,
Davis.
I the one record I recommended for everyone to check out, which I loved, was Alive at the Black Hawk.
Right.
Because they're also playing standards and things like that, and you're hearing them on a gig.
Right.
And
You hear
that's
him on
an
a gig, there's noise in the background. There's,
Yeah, and
it's the
there's a
real deal.
different vibe in a live gig. It's different when you go into the studio. When you're in the studio, it's a controlled environment. And when you're playing in a club, there's another vibe happening, different
Hmm.
feeling. And for me, I think the greatest way to hear people play is well, first of all, whenever you get a chance, go see somebody play live
Right.
because you never forget what it's like to be in the room
Hmm.
and feel that and the air moving and the molecules and just
Hmm.
there's no
And
substitute
I
for
would
it.
add to that, the smaller the venue, the better.
Amen. Right? Amen.
You could go to Village Vanguard and sit behind the drummer on that little bench there, man.
My jazz corner of the
Man,
world.
yeah, there's nothing like that. You're watching a great world-class drummer, and he's 5 feet away from you.
5 feet, three, two.
I
You can pull the hi hat away from him if you want.
I
You're
know.
that close.
I,
Yeah,
I,
that's it. Valuable.
I do a jazz thing, a trio date a couple of times a month, and where we are on a stage, there's a four-top, a table, like the person is sitting right there. And you think that it might be too much for them. And I'll say, how you guys doing? Is this all right? Oh, man, they love it because they're in it. It's right there in front of them. It might be a little louder, but it's not going to blow them away. And they feel like they're in the band. It's a whole different
No,
listening experience.
no substitute for that, man.
Hmm.
I,
I've
I
never heard
feel
anybody
so.
complain.
I feel so grateful. I was able to sit next to most every living hero of mine. I could
Hmm.
sit like next to him.
Right.
And you go there a night or two in a row, and you're sitting there as like a young man, and I'm practically drooling with excitement. The
Hmm.
drummers know you're a drummer.
And they take you
And,
under wing too. That's what they're looking for is cats who
and
really understand and dig and appreciate.
okay, talking about under the wing, another drummer who we mentioned in the list, the great Ed Shaughnessy,
Hmm.
who got so much visibility to the whole world,
From
being
the
the
Tonight
drummer
Show.
on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
He grew up in New Jersey near Sonny Igo. They were kind of buddies. And Ed used to say when he was young, he used to go to 52nd Street. And as a youngster, he'd go see Big Sid. Big Sid used to let him sit in.
Well, I think Mel
So,
Lewis used to go sit right with Gene. Gene would sit him
yeah,
down right next to him, man, on the bandstand.
yeah, there's nothing like that.
Mm.
And, it's all part of a continuum. And now that I realize that I'm in my third of this journey, I have to try to pay forward to the youngsters the stuff I was so fortunate to get from the people before me. And it's something. And I mean, like anything, if you're serious about this music, you got to do some investigating. And it's very important. A lot of times you may hear something on Spotify or whatever it is, iTunes or YouTube. If there's something you really like and it resonates with you, do a little investigating about it. Find out who's playing. A lot of times they don't tell you who's playing. Check it out. This is important to know what you're doing. Don't come to a situation from a point of ignorance. Try to do a little bit of research. And
Especially now in the information age, you can find almost anything.
yeah, it's crazy, but a lot of people don't do it. I mean, I know this young man. He said, "Oh man, I was listening to John Coltrane, and I really liked that drummer." And I said, "Well, did you see who it was? Did you check it out?" He goes, "No." And I said, "Elvin Jones, check him out." I remember as a kid, I'd get a book, the Encyclopedia Jazz by Leonard
Leonard
Feather.
Feather. Yep.
I remember reading about Philly Joe Jones, and it said Philly Joe Jones because I heard the record milestones, and it was like, wow, this guy's something else. And then it talked about him, who his favorites were. And I remember it said Big Sid Catlett, Cozy Cole. So then I
So you
went to
go look
check
them
that,
up.
and you go back and you hear the connection of this foundational continuum. So this is important stuff. Somebody I got to mention, another January drummer who's a personal favorite of mine, and just somebody who was always very encouraging to me, and somebody I love dearly is Aloysius Foster.
Hmm.
Al Foster.
I never knew him.
Al is a great drummer, completely self-taught. You know, he used to, we'd hang out. He goes, yeah, man, I was listening to Max. I was listening to Art Taylor. And just, he's got a very unique approach that's coming from the tradition, but he found his own way. And he's got a fantastic beat, great sound. A great record for people to check out if they never did is a Blue Mitchell album called The Thing to Do, which came out in, I think, 1964 or so, 65. It was basically Horace Silver's band at the time. Blue Mitchell, great trumpet player, Junior Cook, bass player Gene Taylor, and a young piano player. That guy, you might have heard of him, Chick Corea.
Yeah.
One of Chick's first recordings.
I don't know that album. I'll have to look that up.
Oh, it's a great record, man. Fantastic. And Al, he plays an incredibly great groove on Fungi Mama. It's a great record. I mean, Al's like 19 or 20 on this record. And already he's got a great feel, great ideas. And a lot of people may only know of him from when he was playing with Miles with more of that rock-oriented stuff, because he came in with Miles after Jack, where Miles was playing more backbeat-oriented stuff. But man, Al had he's got a great deep pocket, great sound. And I used to go see him, and he'd have me sit in on gigs. And that's like jumping on a burning house. So it's like you had to go in there and take care of business.
You better jump in, yeah. Both.
Yeah, you can't mess around when something like that happens.
All right, well, we've covered some wonderful drummers here. We're coming up to 50 minutes. And like we said, that's only a few, but something must have happened 9 months before January because some damn good drummers were born.
I mean, and you know, for some of you out there that aren't familiar with the names that we mentioned, Dave Weckl is January.
Mm-hmm.
Ainsley Dunbar, the great drummer who played with Journey originally, and then Frank Zappa, played with Jeff Beck, played with many people from Britain. Phil Collins is January.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Grohl is January. I mean, Jeff Watts, he's another great drummer. He's January. He's actually the same day as Jimmy Cobb.
You know who else is contemporary cat, but he really knows his stuff, is Questlove.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Jojo Meyer.
Jojo.
I mean, you know, Questlove has done a great job producing things. You know, he's been definitely somebody who's helping to generate interest in the tradition and things that have happened, you know, and he's one of the drummers out of Philly. I mean, there's so many great, you know, it's fascinating.
Great town for drummers.
It's just fascinating. I mean, you could really do a whole show on each one of these people.
You could do a whole documentary on each one of these people.
Yeah. And there is a documentary on Max Roach that I believe it's called The Drum Also Waltzes. That would be something that everybody should check out. And, you know, Max, he once said something I thought that was hilarious, great. He said, you know, for every 3 beats a drummer plays, 5 come from Papa Joe Jones. We got Cosmo.
I have a little Max story. I met him once. I was talking to him, and I said, did you ever have any trouble making those tempos back then? And it was ridiculous. And he said, yeah. Used to grunt and fart and sweat and everything trying to keep those tempos up. He said, I was talking to Miles. This was back, you know, in the 80s. I was talking to Miles recently, and I said, Miles, why did we play that shit so fast? And Miles said, because we could.
That's right. That's right. I mean, fast is one thing.
Yeah, but
that requires working at it. You just can't jump in and do it. You also have to have the right mindset.
Hmm.
As soon as you think something's like, if you think some, oh, that's so fast, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
Or,
right.
gee, that's so slow, you're in trouble. And you have to have that yin yang balance thing working. When you play super fast, you got to think slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And just like when you're playing real slow, 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to be able to keep that. Fast has got to be relaxed,
Hmm.
and slow has got to have momentum.
And slow can be just as hard as fast, man.
Oh, baby. Everybody's terrified of the space, but you have to feel that space the same way you feel the sound.
I did a session last year for this cat, and I'm walking in and I'm loaded for bear, right? I'm ready to play, and first thing he puts up on is quarter note equals 54.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, man, that's where we're gonna be. You know, so I had to let all that energy. You know, you have to focus it, right? Still got the energy and the passion, but I had to come down from that. Let's hit it, man. Let's go to that.
1, 2.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You
that's a
better be
real test
subdividing that.
too. That's a real test. I heard a lot of times when, the horn players that would go to different towns and pick up local rhythm sections to check out where they were at,
Hmm.
they would count off like a 1, 2,
Hmm.
3. And if you could deal at that tempo, they knew, well, if he's together there, I'm pretty sure he's going to deal with it if we get a little more upstairs.
Ed Self tells a story when he was at the North Texas in that famous 1 o'clock band that, all the guys would come through town that come and visit the school. Joe Williams
Sure.
came by one day and he says to the band, "You guys want to play some blues?" And he passed out a chart and they go, "Yeah, yeah." They're thinking more like, Coltrane or something hot. And it's kind of like it's almost beneath them. "Yeah, yeah, we'll play some blues." And he does that. 1, 2, 3. And the whole band just fell apart and
Yeah.
was handed their asses on something that simple.
Never mess with the old cats,
That's
man.
right. That's
People
right.
see somebody old, they probably forgot more than we'll know.
That's right. Yeah. All right,
Well, man,
man. Well,
here's my man Cosmo.
yeah, I hear him. How's
Cosmo,
Cosmo?
you wanna come on camera? You wanna?
Yeah,
You
he's the
got?
drum dog.
He's got his toy here. Come on. He's not cooperating.
All right. Well, he's
All right.
dog world. All right. Well, we don't know what's coming up, but we're gonna do these probably every couple of weeks. Adam's traveling all the time. He's a globetrotter and bringing his talents to the universe. So,
Well, I'll put a little plug in. If anybody's around Chicago this Friday and Saturday, I'm playing at the fantastic Green Mill, which is one of the great clubs left in this country, and used to be one of Al Capone's joints. I'll be
oh yeah.
playing there with a wonderful trumpet player named Brad Good, along with Ernie Watts and a
Mhm.
wonderful Canadian piano player, Adrian Ferrugia, and one of my favorite bass players, Mr. Jay Anderson.
Oh yeah.
We're going to be there for 2 nights, and then we got some stuff up in Cincinnati the following weekend at the Cafe Vivace. And we're going to be doing something in Lexington, Kentucky, and something else as well in Cincinnati. So if you're out and about in the Windy City and parts of Midwest, please come out and hear some live music.
Ralph
Thank you.
Peterson used to say, "We need you to keep reappearing so we can keep appearing." Something to that
Bingo.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always make the announcement now at a gig when I look out and I see everybody around our age. I say, bring out the kids. Don't ask them, just grab them and bring them out to experience live music because there's nothing like it.
And they will be
And we
moved
need
by
to
it,
keep
man.
it going. We need to keep it going to keep it going. That's it.
When I had my cymbal company, we had a lot of artists from disparate fields, right? They weren't all jazz players, of course. And I would go here and play wherever they were when I could. And man, I never regretted it. It could be something just totally foreign to anything I had ever played in my life, something I wasn't aware of or didn't even necessarily appreciate or feel great about. But I always loved a live performance.
You can learn about things you may want to do, maybe learn things that you may not want to do.
Right.
It's all part of the process. So, Michael, thank you very much for doing this. It's always a treat, always a pleasure. And everybody stay safe out there, and let's just hope for some peace in this crazy world.
Please, yes. And I'll second that. And thank you again, Adam. And we'll see you watch where you watch, and we'll let you know what's coming up. All right.
Aloha.
Peace out.